Wonder of the Wasteland by Zane Grey, Chapter 25, Part 2.
Adam realized that during those lonely hours, he was one instant a primitive man and the next a thinking or civilized man. The thinking man he understood. All difficulty of the problem lay hid in this other side of him. He could watch, he could feel without thinking. That seemed to be the state of the mind of an animal. Only it was a higher state, a state of intense feeling, waiting, watching, suspension. Adam divined that it was the mental state of the undeveloped savage and that it brought fleeting moments of strange emotion. Beyond all comprehension was the marvel of inscrutable nature. Somehow it had developed man, but the instincts of the ages were born with him when he was born, in blood, bone, tissue, heart, and brain. I wonder beyond that was the wonder that man had ever become civilized at all. Some infinite spirit was behind this. In the illumination of his mind, Adam saw much that had been mystery to him. When he had hunted meat, why had the chase been thrilling, exciting, pressing his heart hot against his side, sending his blood in gusts over his body? What a joy to run and leap after the quarry. Strange indeed had been his lust to kill beasts when, after killing, he was sorry. Stranger than this was a fact keen in his memory, the most vivid and intense feeling, come back from his starvation days when he had a wild rapture in pursuit of birds, rats, snakes that he had to kill with stones. Never in all the years had this rapture faded. Relic of his cruel boyhood days when, like all boys, he had killed for the sake of killing until some aspect of his bloody, quivering victim awakened conscience. Conscience, then, must be the great factor in human progress, the difference between savage and civilized man. Terribly strange for Adam to look at his brawny hands and remember what they had done to men. Over him then gushed the hot blood, over him quivered the muscular intensity, over him waved the fierce passion which, compared with that of his boyhood, was as the blaze of sun to a candle. He had killed men in ruthless justice, in strife of self-defense, but always afterward he had regretted. He had fought men in a terrible, furious joy, with eyes tinging red, with nerves impervious to pain, with the salt taste of a fellow creature's blood sweet on his snarling lips, but always afterward he was full of wonder and shame. Just under the skin of every man and every woman, perhaps stronger in one than another, flowed red blood in which primitive instincts still lived and would always live. That was the secret of the desert. The lonely, desolate land, the naked sand and rock-ribbed hills, the wilderness of silence and solitude stirred the instinctive memory of a primitive day. Men watched and listened unthinkingly in the wastelands for what they knew not, but it was for the fleeting trance-like transformation back to savage nature. There were many reasons for which men became wanderers in the wastelands. Love of gold, the need to forget or to remember, passion and crime and wanderlust, the appeal of beauty and sublimity. But what nailed them to the forbidding and inhospitable desert was the instinct of the savage. That was the secret of the spell of the desert. Men who had been confined to cities, chained to dull and humdrum toils, stagnating in the noisy haunts, sore and sick and deflated, standing for some impossible end, when let loose in the gray, iron-walled barrens of the desert, were caught by a subtle and insidious enchantment that transfigured some, made beasts of most, and mysteriously bound all. Travelers passing across could not escape it, and they must always afterward remember the desert with a thrill of strange pleasure and of vague regret. Women who had been caught by circumstance and nailed to homes along the roads or edges of the desert must feel that nameless charm, though they hated the glaring, desolate void. Magdalene Beery, resigned to her doom in Death Valley, had responded to the nature that was in her. Through this thing, Adam saw the almost inconceivable progress of men upward. If progress had not been slow, nature would never have evolved him. And it seemed well that something of the wild and the primitive must forever remain instinctive in the human race. If the primitive were eliminated from men, there would be no more progress. All the gladness of the senses lived in this law. The sweetness of the ages came back in thoughtless watching. The glory of the sunrise, the sadness of the sunset, the whisper of the wind and the murmur of the stream, the music of birds and their beauty. The magic of these came back from the dim, mystic dreamland of the primal day, from the childhood of the race. Nature was every man's mother. Nevertheless, the wonder and the splendor of life was the age-long progress of man toward unattainable perfection, the magnificent victory of humanity over mastery by primal instincts. And the fact that this seemed true to Adam made him wonder if the spirit of this marvelous life was not God. The sun was westering when he descended the long zigzag trail. He walked slowly, tired from his mental strain. And when he got down, the sun was just tipping the ramparts above, flooding the canyon with golden haze and ruddy rays. Adam thought that Jeannie, weary from long waiting, would be asleep on the sand, or at least reading, and that he could slip into the glade to surprise her. They played a game of this sort, and to her had gone most of the victories. Like a panther, he slid through the grasping mesquite boughs, and presently coming to the denser brush, he stooped low to avoid making a rustle. As he moved along, bending so that he touched the sand with his hands, he came upon two fat beetles wagging and contesting over possession of some little particle. Scooping up a handful of sand, he buried them, and then, as they so ludicrously scrambled out, he gathered them up, intending, if he could get behind Jeannie unobserved, to drop them on her book or bare feet. Thus it happened that he did not look ahead until after he had straightened up inside the glade. All before him seemed golden gleams and streaks of sunset rose. The air was thick with amber haze. Jeannie stood naked, ankle deep in the bubbling spring. Like an opal, her slender white body caught glimmer and sheen. Wondrously transparent she looked, for the sunlight seemed to shine through her. The red gold tints of her hair burned like a woven cord of fire in bronze. Glistening crystal drops of water fell from her outstretched hands, and her round arms gleamed where the white met the line of tan. The light of the sun shone upon her pensive, beautiful face as she stood wholly unaware of intrusion. Then she caught the sound of Adam's stifled gasp. She saw him. She burst into a scream of startled, wild laughter that rang with a trill through the dell. Adam, breaking the spell of that transfixed instant, rushed headlong away. End of chapter.